You know, we all put a lot of effort and energy into our activism. I know as a lifelong activist, I certainly do. But maybe sometimes we wonder how much impact we're having. 2 actions that I organised, one after another, came up with kind of independent evidence, stuff that I'd filmed. And I thought I'd share some of this because I think there are lessons that we can all learn, and I'm still trying to learn them. I don't think any of these 5 tips that I'm going to share with you, and I'd love to hear your opinions about them, are that obvious. And I found that out the hard way, because for the most recent protest that I organised, it was not successful at all. Hello, Bob. Bob is now protesting that he wants to be included. Hello, Bob, you coming? Come on. So, come on, Bob. This is what I've learned basically from the Western Dairy Festival, which some of you may have seen the video about that. The Western Dairy Festival, which has been going since the 1960s, was actually cancelled. And we just did the one protest. Then there was Wingfest. And that we had loads of people who had already paid for their tickets. Some of them were in tears, some of them were talking amongst themselves, and they decided not to go in. Some of them even thanked us. And we got all this on camera. So I thought, wow, I like trying to find patterns in things. And I thought, what are the patterns here that jump out to me? The first one, number 1, is target specific events. I think this is really perhaps the most important. One-offs where a clear outcome is actually possible. Now, what do I mean by this? So both the Western Dairy Festival and Wingfest were a one-off event. Okay, they might have been annual, but they were fundamentally one-off things. There was no ongoing commitment from activists to take part in protests. I think this is another key part, is that the audience for each of them, Bob will be joining in, he's like that. He's got Orientalness in him. He comes from India, so he's kind of quite chatty and a senior, so we have to respect him. So the audiences at both were on a mission. They were focused on a very specific thing. In the case of the Western Dairy Festival, obviously they were focused on sort of like dairy products and the exploitation of cows and the use of other cows and the objectification and all that sort of stuff, and being jolly about it. And for the Wingfest, they were focused on obviously consuming chicken body parts. What that meant was, when we rocked up, and it was a different group of people, although some of us were the same, at each of the protests, all our placards, banners and flyers for each one were either the dairy placards, banners and flyers for the Dairy Festival, or the chicken banners and flyers and placards for the Chicken Wing Festival. So immediately, all this information was completely irrelevant to the people that were aiming to enjoy a day of full-on animal exploitation and use. I think this relevance meant that it was harder, although obviously they tried, for them to actually ignore what was going on, i.e. our placards. And this happened also in another protest that somebody told me about, which was a supermarket protest. And apparently a similar sort of thing happened. The protesters were outside the supermarket handing out flyers, and they found that some punters were actually returning the chicken body parts to the shelves after they had seen the information. I do think this whole sort of like relevancy thing is absolutely key. I'd love to hear your tips and tricks and activism secrets. The second, number 2, feel the fear and crack on. Both myself and the other organiser of the Western Dairy Festival were really kind of potentially quite freaked out about how it might pan out. Bob, who you just heard, was actually quite, he was a little bit ill. I'm always very anxious. And he was quite ill, and I was like, oh, should I go? Should I leave him? It seems terrible. I don't want to let people down. In the end, I decided I had to go, and Bob was fine, as you can. The Dairy Festival was the most aggressive from the punters that I'd ever come across, with F words galore, threats, generally obnoxious behaviour, one group of the protesters were met by the police and told, "Oh, it's not like Bristol here," with the obvious implication that we were the bad people. There were torrential rains, loads of wind, and we still stayed there all day. The great thing about being with, there was about 20 or 25 of us at that one, and I think that being with the other festival protesters, I think somehow it made me feel really, I didn't feel panicked, even when people were personally abusing me for filming them. That happened quite a few times. I didn't feel panicked because I just felt like secure with the other protesters, and I even felt kind of secure because of the police, which is not like I normally feel. So I think that it also had an impact on the optics, because there were some people there from the Western North Somerset local council. They had the lanyards on, and they were obviously seeing this and chatting with the police. And I think, although the media kind of totally refused to take any of the stories, it just sort of created some awareness that for a town that is reliant on tourism, it's not good. It's not good. So that's the second thing. It's feel the fear and crack on with it anyway. Now, the Wingfest, another sort of like, it was like an anxiety fest for me prior to that. First of all, the co-organiser was dropped out for personal reasons the day before, or it might have been the morning. So it basically, me and everybody else, I felt completely sort of like freaked out by this somewhat, because I just am like, you know, full of anxiety. A good contingent of activists turned out. We were all really like self-motivated. It was boiling hot and sunny, which I always like. And we had a great day. So the thing is, we got some great footage on the camera as well. So again, you know, this was something where I'd been like totally, oh my God, you know, are they going to... Because it was a festival of so really toxic masculinity, boozing and stuff like that. You know, we were, again, not sure what kind of a response we were going to get. We went ahead and did it. And I know I wasn't the only one. We did it and it was brilliant. The third tip is that unity is strength. And it's all about self-organising. What do I mean by that? So for both of those events, that there was a huger degree of autonomy. Me and the co-organisers sort of like got the people together, but once we got on the ground, we didn't really kind of micromanage what they were doing. We didn't micromanage the placards. If people wanted to bring placards or banners or whatever, they could. I rocked up with like millions and millions of flyers because that's my thing. You know, whoever wanted to speak to the police, because there were police presence both times, would speak to them. And it was like all very collegiate, shared responsibility, effortless. And I think that is really kind of important. I mean, we're all adults, aren't we? We had people from We the Free, independent activists, Open Cages, Animal Rising, and everyone, as I said, knew what they were doing, did what they wanted to, and it was completely fine. Great thing about the Wingfest, which again, I think is something that is really worth thinking about if you're ever doing activism in front of basically what is a static audience, i.e. a massive long queue. If you have, which we did because of the inspiration of one of the activists, John, a massive long flyer stating the obnoxiousness of using chickens, and obviously you had the other people holding placards. What did the people in the queue have to look at? Well, they basically, because we were parallel, they had to look at our signage, or look away, but at least they had to look at our signage to know that they didn't want to look at it anymore. Number 4. I'm really crap with my hands like that. Anyway, number 4, the numbers. We had between 20, I'd say around about 25, some people came, some people went, protesters at both events, and I think this is a really good number. It's a reasonable number to make you feel like there's a nice number of you. I felt secure with this number of people. It felt solid, and it felt kind of impactful as well. Like there was it was a number where the audience, i.e. the festival so-called goers at both events, had to stand up and take notice that there was a little pile of people here who thought, this is what you're doing, guys, is really rubbish. I'm not 100% sure how to get these sort of decent numbers, but I think part of that is staying with point one, something that is really visceral, that really does have like the ick factor. And I think that was the key thing to the choice of both of those events. They both had this really visceral yuck. You know, in this day and age, do we, you know, what are we doing with a dairy festival? What are we doing with a wing fest, you know? So I think when you kind of like have that sort of major sort of like thing that is attracting the protesters, that is really important. I also think that if we mention it as organisers and to each other, that numbers do make a difference. I mean, you know, it could be that tiny bit of extra motivation that makes, you know, brings you along. The fifth item is the one I've just mentioned actually, which is the creative choice of choosing targets with an ick factor and immediacy. Ick factor and immediacy. So both the Western Dairy Festival and the Wingfest had actually appalled me since I first heard of them, and there was probably a similar sense of repulsion and disbelief from other vegans, and I think that immediately sort of like it's a light bulb moment, and you think, no, this is just not on. And they were standalone events, so they were kind of, it was all, you know, it was all kind of like ring fenced. That these 5 things that I've mentioned, those I didn't apply to the Christmas event that I organised. And how well did that one do? Well, you can say that people might be busy at Christmas, but basically there was 3 of us turned up to that one and 2 of us were filming. So, you know, well done us in a sense, but you know, you can say people are busy at Christmas, but it really has made me think, well, are those 5 points really key in organising activism events? I think they are, but I'd love to hear what you think. And if you're finding any value in this video, don't be scared to pet the like button. If you're a solo vegan and looking for some more DIY vegan action, check out the next video. We'll be putting up more ideas about what we can all do. Peace.